Time, 1:53 a.m.
Hi, I'm Anthony. So, I know it's late, God, almost 2 a.m., but it's been a weird, creeped out kind of day, and I really need to get this off my chest. Then maybe I can go back to sleep. This is my first time posting anything on here, so hopefully I won't mess this up too much, and maybe someone can share their experiences with something like this. Unless it's just me, in which case you can all just tell me I'm crazy, and I'll drop the subject. I've set this blog to auto-update, so if I step away or pass out in my chair, then the last thing I wrote should still appear. Should be entertaining at the very least. Alright, so I guess I should start by telling you that I was raised in rural Virginia, though I've been living in Richmond since I finished college in '95. City life is better for me, and definitely a direct result of all this. During my childhood, I used to have awful nightmares, to the point I needed a nightlight as bright as a regular bulb, or at least that's what my parents tell me, but I'm pretty sure they're just teasing. I do remember the nightmares though, and they were very real and very bad. It started the same. I'm 8 years old again, sitting at my table by the back door. It's dark outside, and like most houses in Appalachia, there's no fence in our backyard. Our property ends at the tree line, and within the miles of forest, there's no telling what's beyond that point. I'm alone, and I think I'm colouring something, but then I just stop. There's something behind me, just outside the glass of the back door. I slowly start to turn around, my mind screaming at me to stop. There's something in the backyard, stepping out from the tree line. Then in a flash, I'm hiding behind the drapes. Shaking with fear, I draw one small opening in the drapes, and just as I do, something grabs me. It's been this way for so long, and it's affected me so much that I've developed a deep fear of the woods. The city parks aren't even an option for me. I don't know what happened all those years ago, but I've had enough, and I've finally decided that it's time to face this. So my parents moved out of the old place and moved into a new condo that's easier for them as their age catches up with them. But they kept our old home for the holidays, making Christmas a lot less merry for me each year. Yesterday I headed back to the old place and got settled. Looking out into the woods from the back door, even in broad daylight, just froze the blood in my veins. The first night, while unsettling, was fine. Nothing out of the ordinary, just my old anxieties trying to get the best of me. This put me in a pretty good place this morning, and I'm a guy that likes being busy, so sitting around the house all day, waiting for memories to come back wasn't an option. I figured the best thing to do was to finally face my fear, so I headed purposefully for the woods. It all started off all right. Nice day, birds chirping, pretty standard. I took a footpath and passed a few people along the way, and I'm feeling pretty good overall. I started to remember walking this path as a kid. And now I know what you're thinking. Letting your kids walk alone through the woods? That's some great parenting right there. Trust me, I agree, but it was the early 80s, in a very rural part of my state, and that's just the way things were. So I'm on this path when I come across an old stump. I remember using this as a marker for something, but I can't remember what. I look around it for a moment to see if anything comes to mind, and then I remember. I used this point as a marker for when to go off trail. But why? What's beyond this point? I walked into the woods, climbing over fallen trees and climbing up a small mound when I found it. It was a very old, very secret track I walked a couple of times as a kid. I don't know whether it was nostalgia or instinct, but I decided to push on and explore the trail. If not for old time's sake, but to see if I could remember anything more about the area, and if it had anything to do with my nightmares. I took the walk, and I was enjoying the view, and all around just being in this somewhat unexplored part of nature. But I couldn't shake this feeling. I was afraid, and I had no idea why. I looked over my shoulder a few times, hoping to shake it, but I didn't feel like there was anyone else there. I kept going, curious where my uneasy disposition would lead. I travelled deeper and deeper into the trail, until I reached a rocky incline, and that's when I saw the cave. Now, I'd been cave exploring plenty of times during my childhood, well, at least back before the nightmares, but standing there, I can't remember the last time I was that afraid. I think I remember hearing on Animal Planet that you can smell a wild animal a good distance away, so I wasn't scared of running across any bears or whatever. But the fear was definitely real. I don't know why I didn't just turn back, but there was some part of me that just drove me forward. I made my way up the rocky slope, and with every step I felt my blood getting colder. I quickly reached the cave entrance and just froze. I didn't understand. I could see most of the cave from where I stood, and it was clearly empty save for a bunch of junk. Just a scattering of what once looked to be appliances and clothing, stripped and torn apart. I carefully stepped inside the cave, minding my surroundings and occasionally checking the cave entrance. I finally started to calm down, but I was still confused as to why I'd been so on edge in the first place. I'd been looking over some of the stuff in the cave to try and get my mind off of things, when I noticed something kind of strange. Hidden under all of the junk, scraps of metal and chewed up old toys, etc. It was a metal box. It was about the size of a lunchbox, black, though filthy, and the lock was broken. It almost looked like it had been ripped off. The metal was sharp and twisted. What made it stand out was that it looked like it had been buried, but only halfway. I moved some of the crap from off and around it and dug it out. I honestly don't know what I expected when I opened it, but when I did, I was more confused than anything. All I could see in there was a file. I don't really know what I expected. Some conspiracy film roll, maybe gold, maybe porn? It was a little too dark in the cave, so I took the box to the entrance. As I stood in the light, I reached into the box, and just as I was about to get what was in the file, I heard movement. Out of the quiet came the sound of rustling leaves. It was discreet and getting quieter. After the shady box I just found, images of mask-wearing, machete-wielding, true detective-looking bastards coming my way just popped into my head. I closed up the box and carefully moved towards the edge. But as I'm quietly climbing down from the cave, I get the urge to stick around, just for a moment, to see if I can catch a sight of whoever is heading towards me. I decided to climb a little higher, just enough to see over the other side of the incline. I put the box in the ground and climbed. On my way up, I was thinking to myself that I'm just being paranoid. It's probably just a hiker like me. But as I reached the top, I looked over the incline, at the bottom of which was a small town's worth of trailers and shacks. I could no longer hear the rustling. I focused so hard on trying to listen out for anything but nothing. Just dead silence. Further to the bad decision to stay and look at this hillbilly hell, I moved in for a closer look. All of the buildings had this weird tribal vibe to them. They were decorated in pelts and strange totems made from junk and what I hope were animal bones. Then, as I looked on, I could see it. One shack that stood out from all the others. There were no pelts or totems. No, it was just long shreds of fabric, nailed or tied onto the outside. I carefully stepped towards one of the windows. Keeping low, I slowly rose to look inside. But that's when I heard it, the rustling of leaves approaching from the other side of the building. Nope, I was not sticking around anymore. I had to get out of there, but no matter how quietly I moved, I felt as though the dry leaves were echoing around me. I could hear the footsteps, one heavy thump after another, until silence. Oh shit, did they hear me? I froze. The silence was unbearable, and then was broken by a series of loud clangs. Whoever was there with me was ringing a bell, maybe bringing others here. That's all I needed, so still keeping low, I moved a lot faster so that the ringing of the bell began to fade. I was so terrified of being surrounded that I wasn't watching where I was going. My jacket caught on one of the junk totems and tore. Shit, I said, purely out of habit. That's when I heard them. It wasn't just one set of footsteps, there were several of them, slowly approaching my direction from what seemed to be like all sides of this creepy-ass shanty town. I couldn't hear any talking, singing, not even the slightest hint of interaction. Footsteps and that bell. Whoever these people were, they were getting closer and closer, and that was more than enough for me to get the hell out of there. I made my way back up the slope. Running down, I accidentally kicked over the box I'd left lying around. I was afraid that if whoever was behind me found it outside the cave, they would search for whoever was poking around their home. There was no way I was going back into that cave, so I just grabbed it and ran. I found the footpath, sprinted home, and didn't look back. So I finally get back home, cautiously locking the door behind me, and I take the box to the dining room. I placed it on my desk and just stared at it for a moment, like a kid sneaking an early peek at my Christmas presents. I removed the lid and took out the file. Immediately, there was just nonsense across each of the pages. I read through what I could, and honestly, I thought it was a joke at first. It looked as though there had once been an account of something, but so much was scribbled out or covered in God knows what. The rest was just strange drawings and sentences that seemed to drift off into nothing. I'll note down what I can from this. Maybe someone can help me figure out what it all means. Okay, this is going to get really weird. Page 1.
I was good, so very good. Thought they could win with their tricks and their schemes. Speak and look just as they would. Do this for the greater good. Saw right through them from the start. No, not the start, after the start. I could think then, but I think better now. Every face, voice and deed were all mine. I did it all. Got angry and wrapped me up. Hate straps, hate them. Free now, free as a bird they sang loud as I flew.
Page 2.
Step by step, safe and sound, I'll hide their fate beneath the ground. It's me, must hide me. Eyes everywhere, blind them so not to tell where I go. Step by step, messy filth and dirt everywhere in this outside. Got cold and I found a place that moves. Ugly things inside and loud, made them quiet. Got hungry so I ate, made more mess. Was dreaming deep but woke up. Others in my home, too many and too much noise. Need to work, need more of me. Took my home elsewhere, brought food, but not hungry. Good place, quiet and no watching eyes. Wait and listen, trap and trick. Some get well and others sick.
Page 3.
Walkers trapped and returned, dragging and singing. I don't think they understand. 4 but lost 1 was broken, so no good. Kinda this way, but still sad. Sleeping others much easier. Tear in and pull them out. I like the sleeping ones better. Small ones are good too. Hide thoughts from others, won't let anyone in again. Hide treasure in mess and dirt. Never look there. To cure them all is such a chore, but I will help them more and more.
End. I can't wrap my head around any of it. I just sat, staring at those papers. Why was this half buried in that cave? What was that shack and those trailers for? Honestly, by this point, I feel more lost than before I'd even come back to this place. Maybe I'm just being crazy about it. Oh, a movie! What the hell am I saying? This is just a prop or something. People have filmed out there before, nature documentaries, horror movies, it makes sense. Good God, I feel stupid. Ugh. I am leaving this file back in the box, closing the lid and just pushing it away from me. Is this really what I'd seen all those years ago? Just some low-budget movie being made? And I spent half my life having nightmares about some asshole in a rubber mask. What the hell? It was probably that guy working at Cinnabon on my way into town. He sure looked like he'd made some bad decisions. At this point, I just don't care anymore. The way I see it, anything else can wait for the morning. I'm going to bed for what I expect to be the best night's sleep I've had in years.
Edit. Time 3:51 a.m.
Holy shit, so I just remembered this. I was dreaming and something came back to me. I was a kid again and I was standing deep in the woods. It took me a moment, but I recognized the hidden trail I'd been walking earlier. I was dressed for fall, warm jacket and gloves, and I was kicking the dead leaves that swamped the forest. Then I heard it. A voice, but it was definitely close. Being a stupid kid, I followed it, moving slowly and trying not to make too much noise. The voice slowly got louder, echoing around me. I was so afraid. I felt like the trees were watching me, reaching out for me. I could hear the voice more clearly now. It was creepy and disturbing. Then I reached the source, the cave. I hid behind the tree and stared at the cave. Groaning and inaudible yelling resonated from the darkness. I stood there, too afraid to move. But then I spotted a large rock, and out of panic, I picked it up and threw it as hard as I could towards the cave. The rock landed just short of the ledge and rolled into the leaves. The noises stopped, and silence fell on the woods. I'm terrified, and in that fear I stepped back onto a stick. The snap may as well have been a full-blown scream, and I pulled myself back into the cover of the tree. A brief scattering came from the cave before I see it. I barely got a look before I hid again. It was hunched over at the cave entrance. I could make out its pale grey skin and long, dark, matted hair. I was in the woods with a monster. This was every child's nightmare. It's him! I shook myself awake. I was sweating, but a coldness drained from my spine and all across my body. That's when everything came flooding back to me. The next thing I remember, I was running through the woods, trying to find my way back home. I got stuck in some brambles, panicked, and fought my way through. It was only when I got home I saw how cut up my face was. That was the night my parents were on date night, and my older brother Cody was babysitting me. I tried to hide it at first, thought I'd get in trouble for going off the track. Cody was watching TV, and I was over by the table near the back door. I was drawing it, the creature I'd seen. I was so caught up in getting what I'd seen on paper, I didn't even realize how dark it had gotten. I got up and turned the dining room light on, but as I was walking back to my chair, I looked into the pitch dark of the backyard and felt like I was being watched. I slowly walked to the switch for the backyard light, and without taking my eyes from the darkness, I switched it on. There it was, just in front of the tree line, watching me. Immediately I closed the drapes and hid, then I shut off the lights in the dining room and knelt by the drapes. It was still there. I could just about see this tall, monstrous thing. It started to step out of the tree line, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I shot around to see my brother. "What are you doing?" he asked, looking at me strangely. "Why did you turn the light off?" I looked back towards Cody, fear gripping me. "It's him," I said. "Who?" My brother was worried. I looked away as if he's right behind the drapes. And say it. The name that's been hiding in the back of my mind for decades, quietly feeding my nightmares. The Goblin Man. I make a small opening to see into the backyard, and he's gone. I can't see him at all, but I know he's close. Cody sticks his head through to look outside as well. "I can't see anything," he says, unimpressed. "I think you're just imagining things, bud." I was pulling my head back inside when there was a loud thump on the roof. Cody and I fell silent until I broke it. "He's trying to get in." Cody and I looked at one another before he led me into the living room, and I was told to sit on the couch. I saw him leave the room. I think it was because he was going for my dad's gun, and he didn't want me to see where it was hidden. He walked back into the dining room and over to the back door. "Wait here," Cody says, opening the door. He's armed with Dad's gun and is stepping outside. I tried to talk him out of it, but he's already scanning the backyard. He disappears from sight, leaving me staring at the open door, expecting the Goblin Man to step into the house, trapping me inside with it. After a moment, I hear my brother tell whoever is out there that he is armed and will shoot anyone who tries to get in. The silence is deafening until Cody finally comes back inside, shuts and locks the door behind him. Nothing happens, and eventually my parents come home. Everyone goes to bed, but I can't sleep. I keep expecting to see the Goblin Man opening my door or crawling out from under my bed. I must have fallen asleep, as I remember sitting up in bed and staring at the window. I walked over to it, and when I looked outside, I see a leg passing the glass. I move to the next room to follow it. I can hear its steps, trying to keep quiet so as not to wake my family. I avoid entering my parents' and my brother's rooms. However, as I avoided these rooms, I couldn't hear him anymore, until I heard a loud creak. I was stood next to the bathroom, and looking into the darkness, I could see the window slowly opening. A large, emaciated-looking hand reached inside, and then I saw his face. Those bright eyes illuminated in the darkness, his dull skin almost camouflaging him. He was only visible by my eyes adjusting to the dark. I could barely see the rest of his face, just a distorted skull with elongated features. He stopped, looked ahead, and he just saw me. I screamed for my parents, and when I looked back, he was gone. I must have had a hell of a story for my parents that night, but that's not important. It's real. He's real. All this time, I thought maybe it was just some deep-seated nightmare, or the remnants of an old horror film I convinced myself was real. What is he? What's with this file I found? I've looked over it again, and while writing this, there was something I missed. Some of these pages keep listing random numbers gradually getting higher, and written next to them is one word, more, and the lid. I hadn't paid any attention to it, but on the underside was a code or an algorithm. It looks like it's been carved or scratched into the metal. Is it something to do with what's in the file? What does it mean? More importantly, why did that thing leave this in the cave? Oh, God. I just had a thought. All of those trailers near the cave and those footsteps. What if it's all connected? If it isn't just some big coincidence, and if that creature is still out there, then he's been living in the woods for all these years. What's more is that I walked right into his house and reached into the fridge. How did he find me the first time? Does he know where I live? What if he... Give me a moment. There are people in my backyard. I can't see how many, but they're closing in. I think there's some on my roof and maybe in my attic. Please, can someone call the police? I don't know how long I can hold out. My address is... Good day, I'm Jar19 and thank you for listening. Well, the Goblin Man should hopefully keep you on your toes should you find yourself exploring the Appalachian Mountains. The wilderness has always been a great place for discovery, but you never truly know who's following in your footsteps, or lurking behind the next tree. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then perhaps subscribe, leave a like, and if you're feeling particularly cheeky, maybe even a comment. I do hope that you'll join me again. Stay safe, sleep well, but remember, here we make monsters.